You know, this is the same plant I had back there a year ago. Look how much of it's died. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. Before I get all navel-gazy and frankly pretty negative, I think it's worth saying up front, I committed a while ago to doing this whole thing for 3 years before I really step back and decide whether to continue on with it. And while that was in the before times when the Week I Review actually made sense as an idea, I'm sticking to it. Barring serious tragedy or obviously my own death, there will continue to be uploads on this channel through next August. So don't take any of what I'm about to say as me quitting. I'm not. Okay? Okay. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me... Actually, you know what? You can call me Alec this time. Hi. How are you? Let me know in the comments below. I'm okay. Been doing a lot of thinking lately, what with the channel turning 2 this week, and I figured it would be a good time to sit and reflect. Starting with that most visible of YouTube metrics, subscriber count. When I shot the string of 5 videos that made up my first anniversary celebration, I had around 700 subscribers. And as I'm shooting this, it's just over 6,400, which is a 9-fold increase in 1 year. And that's a pretty big jump. But, and of course there is one, I don't really think subscriber count is all it's cracked up to be. In my experience, subscription is primarily a matter of inertia. I haven't subscribed to multiple channels that I really like and frequently watch videos from, but once I have subscribed, I will stay that way long after I've stopped watching the videos because, like, what if they finally do something again that I want to see? Isn't that worth all of the precious moments I've lost in my life scrolling past their thumbnails? The answer is always no, and yet I remain subscribed. And so it must be with the people subscribed here. Most of my last 10 videos haven't been seen by even 10% of them. And since the analytics tell me that nearly all my watch time comes from people who aren't subscribed, the actual number is probably closer to 2%, with the rest just waiting until it's one unrelated thumbnail too many before they click off forever. And while I appreciate that 2% greatly, it's a pretty demotivating number. Episode 52.1 was called A Year Spent on YouTube Shatters the Optimism but Not the Drive. And while I wouldn't say year 2 shattered the drive, there are definitely some cracks showing. Because it tells me that something is wrong. But it's what's always been wrong, going back to day freaking 1. If you come here only because you like my comedy reviews or my band reviews or even movie reviews, and that's all you want from this channel, then on any given week, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be disappointed in what I've got. And if you're interested in my opinions but hate my face, sucks for both of us, I guess. But there's a specific backhanded compliment that I get pretty often, which is, why does this channel have so few subscribers? Which clearly speaks to my inability to market properly. I'll be honest, every single success that I have had was a fluke. And unfortunately, the flukes usually aren't my best videos. Like the review of Solo, that remains my most popular video on any given day thanks to some algorithmic good fortune. It's just not very good. Its average view duration is around 2.5 minutes, which just so happens to be the point at which the video becomes watchable. That is a lot of people's first impression of the Week I Review, and thus their only one, and I genuinely hate that. And if someone comes into one of my newer reviews about The Assistant or The Nightingale and then decides not to stick around, cool. They're misogynistic racists and I don't need them here. But with Solo, someone clicking away might be a terrible person, or they might be a person with taste. And that would be a terrible shame. And I really wish that I could just redo that video and replace the file like I can on Vimeo so that people are getting something that better reflects the current state of the channel rather than whatever bullshit was going on 17 months ago. And on the note of non-representative videos that I wish I could change, my music licensing subscription comparison from December 2018 accounts for fully 1/3 of my ad revenue, and substantially more if you account for those affiliate links I ended up having as a result of it. But it's almost 2 years out of date, and I want to update it purely because I appreciate what it has given me and would like it to be as useful as possible to the handful of people who find it each day. I may end up doing a 2020 or, at this rate, 2021 update just because I feel bad that some of the information is no longer relevant. But back to the broader point, I don't know what I'm doing. I find it irritating when other people self-promote, so I don't do it nearly to the degree that I should, which isn't helpful, but as someone who finds self-promotion irritating, I also respect it about myself. But on the other hand, I don't really have a problem with clickbait-ish thumbnails and video titles when others do them, and yet I've still got this stupid fucking hang-up about them. I may say that I'm too good for that, but the reality is that I don't think I'm good enough. My Parasite video hit the sweet spot between clickiness and accuracy, and the Solo one is pretty good too. That's definitely a big factor in why they are far and away my most successful videos. But I can't replicate it. And for my thumbnails, well, I redid literally all of them a few months ago to remove the extraneous text that didn't mean anything to anyone. But I don't know, it doesn't seem like enough, and I'm not sure what would be better. This is my roundabout way of saying that if someone who can do better wants to do my thumbnails for like $10 or something, hit me up. And all of that is frustrating. But there's something more fundamental going on right now that further complicates all of this, which is 2020. It sucks, and it's getting worse all the gosh damn time. And while I've been pretty fortunate, all things considered, the country's continued closure has definitely had an effect on me, and obviously on the channel as well. In the plan and Q&A video I did shortly after New York went on pause, I acknowledged that there would be a long-term need for the socially distant, lockdown-adjacent situation that we had just entered, but wasn't convinced America would get its shit together and do it. And that has borne out. But after the initial and catastrophic failure, at least, New York has done pretty well. I have expected on numerous occasions for those case and death rates to skyrocket as the city opened back up, but it hasn't happened so far. That said, we're still pretty restricted, and the handful of activities currently available to New Yorkers aren't conducive to the types of videos that I was making on this channel before March 17th. I can still review a lot of what I had before: movies, TV shows, video games, but I'm not seeing many new releases these days, rather going back and filling in some of the gaps in my knowledge, and that removes a critical separation that had once existed. When my calendar was full of upcoming screenings and shows and whatnot, I was able to look ahead and create a sort of skeleton schedule. I could guess what might be interesting to talk about, and if something else came up that I had more to say about, great. But having a plan was an important stabilizing factor that kept the channel from bleeding into every part of my life. Now, everything is reaction, meaning I'm constantly wondering, is this something I should review? And more problematically, should I watch a movie that maybe I could review instead of doing some other activity that I know I wouldn't? Like finally looking at some of the dozens, if not hundreds of games on my Steam library that I have never even downloaded? Because although time is meaningless, the calendar keeps moving forward, and I have a schedule to keep, even if I don't really do that so much these days. In episode 52.1, I said I was going to be less beholden to it, doing more like 40 to 45 videos in my second year than the full 52. And it turns out that including this one, I did 45 weeks of videos, but with extra videos in certain weeks bringing the total output to 53. But I'm always conflicted about reviewing older works because there's more weight to discussions in retrospect, and I feel less good about my now 2-year-old decision to use minimal accompanying footage. It's not really a choice in the sense that I would be temporally incapable of putting out one video a week while also having a full-time job and other life responsibilities if any given video were edited more like a traditional video essay. But a part of me wonders how that impacts the channel's ability to grow, and then I think a little about the chicken and the egg. I don't use extra footage unless I think it's absolutely necessary because I don't have the time. But maybe if I did put in the time anyway and showed less of my face, the channel would be more successful, and then I could dedicate more time to it. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to change it, but I do wonder sometimes. And when looking back at potential subjects, I also have to contend with the fact that people much smarter than me have probably already written or made videos about things, at which point, what am I adding to the conversation? And I mean that in more ways than one. I don't want to rehash old arguments or say the same thing everyone else says. With new releases, I typically write my reviews aware of critical consensus, but never having actually read anyone else's thoughts. But if I review something that is years or decades old, I will read what people have said to determine if there's anything new that I can say. And even if there is, I have to ask, is it valuable? Let's take Kentucky Route Zero, a game that I was going to review a couple of months ago, but then I had a breakdown that I decided to put on camera. Remember that? That was real fucking embarrassing on a lot of different levels. And the further away I've gotten from it, the less necessary my inevitable 6-minute rant about how inconsistent rules kind of ruined Act 5 for me felt. Sure, it is objectively bad design that some of the interactions required to finish the game are started with a button press, while others just happen. The developers wrongly assumed that I wanted to hang around a kid long enough for his stupid scene to play out. I didn't, which meant that I spent literally 30 minutes running around this one small area trying to figure out what I was supposed to do before scrubbing through a Let's Play and reading a walkthrough. At which point I realized I needed to just stand next to the stupid kid for a couple minutes, and then the game was like, you can win now. And I hated that. But so what? So much of that game is so good. Plus, it was truly lovely to behold on the 3x2 screen on my laptop. The boxier aspect ratio reframed key sequences in some amazing ways, and I recommend everyone who can play it that way do so, because it adds to the timelessness of the narrative. And that scene at the bar as the roof flies away and almost the entire screen is stars. It's just wonderful. But I didn't record my playthrough and wouldn't have used my own footage to emphasize that point. So what would I really be there to say? That I don't replay choice-driven narrative games on principle? I've already said that, and I'm sure I'll say it again. That didn't seem like enough. When I look back on unfinished reviews, I tend to decide that they're not worth finishing because whatever I thought I had to say in the moment just feels superfluous. The week I review is built on hot takes, and if I give myself more than a week or two to think about it, I'm likely to second guess myself until there's nothing left to say. And I'm surely not going to do some off-the-cuff thing with no script in front of me, because what little value I have as a reviewer does not come from extemporaneous bullshit. If I was doing reviews the way so many people do, with outlines or off-the-dome ideas jump cutted together, this channel would be bad. Just straight up. I mean, anyone who has watched any of the live streams that I do can attest to my inability to stay on topic. It's just tangent after tangent, and I never finish my original thought. I do like those live streams, though. It's a small group that comes typically between 10 and 20 people, and a lot of the same folks each time. They come from all over: Indonesia, South Africa, Austria and Germany, Romania, the UK, and more. It's awesome. Unfortunately, time zones mean that not everyone who would like to attend can, but I have been enjoying those as a semi-social experience in a time when I'm really not having much social anything. Also, I got fan art, which is super dope. Thanks, Willow. There's a specific vibe that comes from having so few people there. The chat moves slowly enough for me to follow, and anyone who wants to ask a question that I feel comfortable with will get an answer, and no one needs to give me money to be noticed. And so it feels more intimate and immediate than if there were 200 or 2,000 or whatever insane numbers the multi-millionaires are pulling in on their streams. But we're hardly on equal footing, and the power imbalance isn't always where you expect. On the one hand, I am the person at the center of it all, the reason that all those folks from all over the world are together in a chat box on a YouTube page. But also, you, the person watching this, know things about me that I don't know about you, like, for example, my face. There was this guy who came to the first few streams I did who I ultimately banned for saying gross things about women. But before I did that, he had mentioned multiple times this idea about us meeting near Union Square to talk about a project he was working on. He would pay for lunch if I gave him hundreds of dollars of consulting advice for free or whatever. And the familiarity there bothered me. And if you were able to see those streams with the chat beside, you could probably see that in my face as I sidestepped the question. And so when I blocked him, there was an unrelated feeling of relief. But then he came back using another handle that I blocked, and then another, always bringing up that Union Square lunch. And I really didn't enjoy that. There was a commitment that I found a little disturbing. You know, that guy knows what I look like, generally where I live, and depending on how long he's been around, what my apartment looks like. And I'm not really afraid of him or anyone else, despite what the third season of Hannibal, review forthcoming, probably, it seems to suggest. But I also didn't need to say during a live stream which restaurant I was going to be picking up my dinner from immediately after it ended, and yet I did that. And immediately thought, well, that was dumb. I've wondered how big I would have to get on this platform before I was recognized on the street, and what my reaction to that happening would be. While the Week I Review is obviously way too small for that in general, it seemed plausible that I could be recognized at the Alamo Drafthouse because of my Parasite review, or at the Gramercy Theater for my Dance Gavin Dance review. But it hasn't happened, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I feel like I'm gonna be real weird about it if it does. The only internet personality I have ever actually stopped to speak to was MatPat of the Various Theorists, who I ran into at the Nintendo Switch unveiling in New York back in early 2017. I had just started watching game theory literally the week before and had been binging it, so I felt more compelled than I otherwise might have, and he was very pleasant, and I appreciate that. And I thought about this when Philip DeFranco had him on his podcast last week. It was a fascinating conversation, and one particularly relevant topic for me was the value of audience, and how MatPat's proudest moment involved a viewer who was deeply helped by a video he had done. And that led into them shit-talking newer creators, you know, the types going to these coronavirus parties because they have this seeming disdain for their audiences and the role that those audiences play, what influencer actually means beyond the ability to use this monolith as a way to get a paycheck. I don't think of myself as an influencer or a YouTuber, but that's separate from believing that I don't have some kind of influence. If I post a video that makes someone say, oh, now I want to watch this movie, or now I feel differently about this game, or whatever, that's influence in a literal sense. And I'm trying to use that to get people to experience cool things and also hate fascists, but I'm not molding impressionable young minds here. Only a fraction of a percent of y'all are under 18, and 2/3 are 25 or older, and that's what I want. I couldn't bear the responsibility of a young audience, and I'm just not a bad enough person to exploit one properly. So I tend to ignore the possibility that kids might be watching until they make themselves known, at which point I have to figure out what to say to a sexual assault survivor commenting on my review of Daniel Sloss's ex that she's 15, or some random person who DMs me on Instagram and says she's 17, the latter of which happened this past Friday, and so I've been thinking about it a lot. For context, this person DM'd me a month or so ago and asked if she could have a link to one of the short films that I had referenced in a live stream. I respected the gumption and said, sure, why not? Sent it to her and didn't think any more of it. And then she popped back up on Friday because she wanted personal advice on how to write a story. Like the guy who wanted me to critique his project, that's kind of a big ask, and so I was a little annoyed, but she kept going and mentioned that she doesn't know what she's doing in life because she's 17, and that brought it from annoying to weird, because I've been past the point where I feel comfortable talking to teenagers online for nearly a decade at this point. But I'm also not about to say, hi, please don't talk to me until you're older, because that creates this really gross energy and has all sorts of unintended implications. So what do? Well, I gave her a writing prompt that asked her to really think through a 17-year-old girl privately messaging a random guy in his late 20s on the internet, which addresses the question while putting into clearer context the situation that we had found ourselves in. You know, two birds, one stone sort of thing. In general, I respond to Instagram or Twitter DMs as long as they aren't weird or sexual. Please don't do that. Also, I'm not going to be your Snapchat friend under literally any circumstances. To the girl who told me to get one because there were benefits to that, whose username was also attached to a Tumblr full of naked male selfies, I respect the hustle, but I'm not that fucking stupid. I feel like we've lost the plot. There are a lot more things that I considered talking about, from demonetization as a concept to specific dumb things that I did, like keeping in some wrong and objectively problematic discussion in my Joker review for way too long. But I think to wrap things up, I should go back to the beginning and the value of milestones. Hitting 100 subscribers way back in the day was great, because it meant that I could actually have the dedicated URL that added the slightest air of legitimacy to all of this. Hitting 1,000 subscribers was even better, since it meant that I could join the partner program and all that validation that came from that. But there are fewer and fewer meaningful milestones from this point on. 10,000 is the obvious next one, but there's no tangible reward associated with it. I would very much like to get to 10,000, because why wouldn't I? Maybe I'll do merch then or something. But what would mean a lot more to me would be a 1,000 view floor. I would really like to reach the point where every single one of my videos gets at least 1,000 curious clicks. That would make me feel a sense of accomplishment that an increase in subscribers on its own doesn't and can't. And maybe that'll happen and maybe it won't. Look, no one owes me anything. Just because I put work in and make videos that I think are worth watching does not mean that I deserve any kind of success on this or any other platform. But as I look to the year ahead, very unsure of what's to come, the only thing I really know is that I would like the week I review to be more of a community, one with names that I recognize in the comments and the live streams, but also ones that recognize each other. Because the truth is, sure, I'm doing this for me, but I also wouldn't be doing it into the void. Here's to year 3. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hammer and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, @BlasianFMA, Magnolia Denton, Elliot Fowler, and Greg Lucina. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I don't care. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.